Okay, I think I've got it recording. I'm going to get started. This is the weekly Q&A session for June 4th, 2020, and I'm Jamie Hartman. And just a quick disclaimer, you can see it there on the screen. I am not here to diagnose or treat any disease. My background is as a nutritional therapy practitioner. I'm also a certified or an AIP certified coach, and many of the questions I answer have to do with that. You should know that this information is for your information only. It is not a substitute for medical advice, and you should always consult with your medical provider before making any changes to diet, supplement, medication, or exercise programs. I'm here to answer 4 questions today that were submitted in advance, and I'm going to jump right into those. The first question has to do with getting vitamins and minerals. The person who sent this in said that she is struggling and doesn't want to use supplements, which I am on board with. She asks if I have reviewed food log apps, do any give good nutritional detail. She'd like to see what she's getting from her food and how consistent or inconsistent my diet is with various vitamins and minerals. This is a great question. And as I said, as I was reading it, I am with you. I prefer not to use supplements either. Getting it from your food is the best way. Supplements can have their place therapeutically. If we're ill, if we have an inability to digest foods, if a deficiency has been identified by a practitioner, clearly a supplement can be very useful, and we're really grateful to have them. But these nutrients, these vitamins and minerals that you're talking about, are going to be better utilized by your body when they come packaged in the form that nature intends. They have many cofactors that allow them to be absorbed and to be utilized, and they generally come packaged with those when we eat them in whole food form. So that's my little disclaimer, or a little cheering you on about kind of trying to stay away from supplements, unless they've been, identified, again, therapeutically. They have their place. Now, food log apps, they also have their place. There are some that give some really good nutritional detail. My caution with them, though, is that most of the people I see who get into using them start to become a little bit too focused on the numbers. And that is, a danger in a couple different ways. One way that's a danger is that we can't necessarily trust those numbers. So it kind of doesn't matter which food log app you use. They generally draw their data from the same couple databases. And if that database isn't accurate, which we have no way of really knowing if their head of cabbage is the same as your head of cabbage in terms of its nutrient content. So we don't really know for sure. We don't want to put too much stock into something that the computer's telling us about how many units of whatever it is we're talking about it's giving us. The other reason that I get kind of cautious about recommending them is that when people get very focused on those numbers, they lose sight of that whole idea of food being more than just the sum of its parts. There really is a place for you to eat intuitively within the AIP framework. You don't have to count everything. When you count everything, you start to sometimes tip over into having that be counterproductive in a variety of different ways. What instead I usually tell people to do is to just ask yourself if you're getting variety. So if you want to keep track of something, keep track of the different types of plants that you eat during the week, the different types of vegetables and fruit that you eat, and try to get that to a really high number. Challenge yourself to eat more variety than you did last week, and variety in the colors. So if you can look back over the day and say, okay, I hopefully ate a lot of green because we should eat green every day in our vegetables. But let me see if I ate some other colors as well in my vegetables. Did I have anything that was orange? Did I have anything that was purple or red? Did I have anything that was bright yellow? And if you had all those colors, then you can be pretty confident that you're getting the vitamins and minerals that you really need. If you need a little bit firmer guideline on that, think of it in terms of having 6 cups of vegetables per day. So this is a good starting point. You could always have more, and you can vary this to some degree, but it's a good place to start. And you can further break down those 6 cups into 3 cups of green vegetables a variety of green vegetables. We don't want to just have the same one every time. So if you really like broccoli, that's great, but you want to mix in other green vegetables. And then the other 3 cups should be other colors. That will allow you to get a lot of starchy vegetables in, because a lot of those other colored vegetables are going to give you some good starchy, dense carbohydrates that are also dense in vitamins and minerals. So think carrots, think beets, think turnips, think squashes, red cabbage, all of those wide range of colors that you can come up with when you're looking through the produce section. And you can have fruit. Fruit has tons of vitamins and minerals too. So don't ever feel like you have to restrict that. You can have 2, 3, 4, 5 even pieces of fruit a day, spread out. They shouldn't be the first thing that you eat, and eat them instead of everything else, because we don't want to train our taste buds to only like sweet things, and we don't want to shoot up our blood sugar with lots of fruit, but we can have fruit every day. So I got beyond your question here, but I want to go back to it and just say that, have I reviewed any food log apps? Yes. One that I think is pretty good is Chronometer. Although if you want to use it, I would suggest just using it for a representative sample of your intake, and not to kind of commit yourself to logging every day for the reasons I outlined before. So if you want to check and see, download Chronometer and then track what you eat for a week and see if there's anything that's missing. And then that'll give you an idea. Keeping a food journal is really useful. But I don't necessarily like people to get overly focused on what you need to get focused on in order to use an app like this, which is like how much of everything did you eat. I don't want you weighing and measuring food. I want you to listen to the cues from your body and eat, to satiety, to eat to, what feels right for you. So you can learn how to manage those signals and respond to them appropriately and enjoy food. So that's my 2 cents on that. Hopefully that was helpful. The next question is a good one. Another good one. I love these good questions. What are the biggest challenges you see your clients have with AIP? So first of all, the clients that I work with one-on-one, that are my private clients, a lot of them have already been on AIP, and they've come to me because they want troubleshooting. So their challenges vary. They tend to, a lot of times the challenge they might have is that maybe they have become overly restrictive. Or maybe they are not, they're really good about avoiding foods, but they haven't been including foods. That's probably the most common thing I see with my clients, honestly, is that I look at what they're doing and they're like textbook perfect in terms of what they're avoiding, but they are not necessarily getting the 6 cups of vegetables I talked about the last question. They're not necessarily eating organ meats. They're not necessarily eating a variety of proteins. They're eating the same. They like chicken, and that's what they have at almost every meal. So we're not seeing fish, we're not seeing lamb, we're not seeing beef, we're not seeing any variety in those proteins. So that's probably the biggest challenge. And a lot of those, and let's face it, a lot of those things that I'm talking about are not things people love to eat. We aren't used to in our culture eating some of these stranger sounding vegetables. Turnips and rutabagas are not necessarily people's favorite food. And certainly organ meats can be a challenge for a lot of people, and bone broth and fermented foods are not necessarily things that you start out having had in your diet. So that's a big challenge. But I would say kind of across the board more generally, when I think about all the people I work with who are using AIP, so I'm also thinking about the group programs that I work with where they truly are beginners to AIP. I think one of the big challenges that people will have is that it's really easy to get overwhelmed at the beginning when you start, to feel like you have to do everything immediately, and finding this overwhelming sense of I have to be perfect or it's not worth doing at all. This is something I see really commonly among people who are kind of doing it on their own or have signed up for a beginner's program for AIP, is that they're surprised to have a coach say, hey, it's okay to take this in stages. In fact, it's probably going to be better because it's less stressful, and stress is a big part of this. It's more sustainable. You might not even need to eliminate all those foods. If there's a food that's just like a deal breaker for you, if you're like, I just cannot function right now without my cup of coffee, do everything else then. You can eliminate the coffee later or not. Maybe you don't even need to. But, that feeling of that having to be perfect and then feeling overwhelmed by all the information. on the, path to trying to be perfect, because there is so much information now. I think in many ways, when I first did AIP in 2013, in a way I had some advantages because I didn't know what I was doing. We didn't have a lot of information. There were just a few small resources out there at first. And then, ultimately that was the year that Sarah Ballantyne's first book came out. So we did then have that. But, we were still kind of like figuring it out as we went. And so you didn't always have this constant sense of like, I must be doing something wrong because I haven't incorporated every suggestion that I've ever heard. So those are the biggest challenges. I think I answered probably more than you asked. I think the advice I would give to overcoming those challenges is, one, keep it simple, be kind to yourself, give yourself time, accept that for most people, transitioning to AIP is a really huge change. If they're eating a standard diet, a standard Western diet, this is radically different. And so give yourself time to make that change. It's totally okay. Again, keeping it simple, but also maybe kind of putting yourself on an information diet for a while you're starting out, so you don't constantly feel like you have to be doing one more thing. So, it's a great question. And I don't know that I answered it very well because I came up with a lot of stuff once I started talking. You guys know I don't plan. I look at the questions ahead of time, and if I need to research something, I do, but I really don't plan out what I'm going to say, as you can tell by the answer to this question. All right, let's see what our third question is. Okay, this one: what AIP resources or communities are you a part of, or do you recommend joining for newbies? So I manage a small Facebook group that is focused on people who are using paleo or AIP who have inflammatory bowel disease. So I tried to name it something that when you're searching for, you'd find it easily. It's paleo AIP for IBD. So that's a diagnosis specific group. And there are many others like that I have nothing to do with, because I wanted to just kind of stick with what, I know, which is my personal experience. So there's that one. That's the one I'm part of. I'm also a member of the AIP or autoimmune protocol recipe. I think that's it. I don't remember the name of it, but it's a recipe focused group. And I like that because one of the moderators is a blogger, Erin Cox, and she does a really good job of kind of keeping people focused. She's got some help too, but she does a good job of kind of filtering out when people make suggestions that are not AIP compliant and are confusing to new people. I think that's an important thing. So if you join one of these communities on Facebook or on any other social media platform, don't let it overwhelm you. And if you start to see that like people are making suggestions that are not good suggestions and nobody corrects them, it may be best to just exit yourself from that group, because those get frustrating. I had to leave some of the AIP Facebook groups that I had been a part of before I became a health coach. So I kind of transitioned from, being a member to being somebody who had knowledge of it, because I felt this overwhelming need to want to correct everybody who had a misconception, and I just couldn't keep up on it. And so anyway, I recommend looking to see if there are any groups that are specific to your diagnosis, if you have one. And then also looking for any groups that are specific to your local area. If you're not sure, I know searching sometimes for groups on Facebook can be almost impossible. So if you're not sure if there's a local group for your area, go to autoimmunewellness.com. They have I don't remember where it is on their webpage, but they have a community listing page that lists worldwide Facebook groups that, at least to some degree they vetted. I know, we can't police everything. We can't, make sure that everybody's always giving great information, but at least knowing that they're doing their best, that particular group is. So there's groups in, all the regions of the United States and Canada, Europe. I believe there's an Australian group, there's several other places. So that would be, locals helpful, and locals helpful because it helps you to be like, where do I find, whatever food I'm looking for. They tend to not be super active usually, but I've always found that the one that I'm a member of, the Mid-Atlantic one, whenever anybody posts a question, they get responses. People are happy to help somebody in their local area find something. All right, checking the time. Okay, good. I believe this is the last question. Yeah, this is the fourth question. So this question is about the reintroduction phase of AIP. Are there any resources I recommend for the AIP reintroduction phase? And I'm so glad you asked this question, because absolutely, yes, I do. Reintroductions, I'm going to just kind of go on a little soapbox here since I have time. Reintroductions are so commonly misunderstood. I think a lot of people think of a reintroduction as like maybe something that is you're taking advantage of the system, or you shouldn't do. And in fact, you should do them. I really push people to do reintroductions. It's an important phase. The goal of AIP is not to just get to the elimination phase and feel good and then never deviate. You miss opportunities. There are countless reasons for why doing reintroductions are important. And one of them is simply so that you don't fear food, because the reality is you do the whole elimination phase, you cut out all of those foods, you feel great. You probably don't need to continue avoiding all of those foods. But if you're living your whole life in fear of all of those foods, that's not healthy. So the reintroduction phase, maybe if it's more helpful for people to think of it as the testing phase, that might be a better way to put it, that you don't have to start eating any of those foods. You can test a food, find you handle it, and be like, no, still not interested. That's fine. But then I don't need to fear that food. I can just choose not to eat it, right? So reintroduction is important for that, to test, to see. And then there are some foods that when you test them and you find out that they work, you do want to add them to your diet because they provide some nutrients, because they provide some pleasure, because they make your life more complete. And that's all very valuable. So I love when people ask me about reintroductions, because I think they're so important, and they get lost a lot in the noise around elimination phase. And for good reason, because the elimination phase is hard, and it's hard to cut all those foods out, but it's important to recognize that you want to move into the reintroduction phase when you are ready and move through it so you can get a better sense of what your body will do best on. So how do you do those reintroductions? Because you want to have a plan. So there are several resources that I would recommend on both autoimmunewellness.com and on the Paleo Mom. So that's Angie Alt and Nikki Trescott's website. That's Autoimmune Wellness. And the Paleo Mom is Sarah Ballantyne. I know both of them have some really good resources for how to do reintroductions, kind of the comprehensive reintroduction guide. So those are the two sources that I tell people to kind of start with, and if you're seeing conflicting information, go to one of those two and see if it checks out there, because those are the two places where I know that they have got the right information. So that's the Paleo Mom and Autoimmune Wellness. There is an ebook that I like. It's been around for a few years now, and it's very good. It has recipes for how to, and ideas for how to even incorporate some of these foods. And that is Eileen Laird's ebook. I think it's called Reintroductions on the AIP. I can't remember what it's called, but if you go to phoenixhelix.com. So I'm giving you a couple different websites there: Autoimmune Wellness, Paleo Mom, and then Phoenix Helix. If you go there and look for her ebook, there's a charge for that. It's a purchase, but it's not much, and I think it's really a good one to have access to. I will say though that there's one point in which Eileen and I disagree. So Eileen says, that what she suggests you do is follow the reintroduction process, which she lays out. The first parts of it I agree with. You are basically going to eat a little bite, see if you have any immediate reactions, eat a larger amount, see if you have a slightly delayed reaction, so like within the next couple hours, and then eat a full serving, and then wait a few days. So all that I agree with. Then she says that you should take a week where you eat the food every day and see if you have any reactions to it. And I actually don't really care for that advice. I mean, I can see where she's coming from, because it's nice to know, I shouldn't eat that food every day. I don't love that, because one, it says that you have to kind of set aside almost 2 weeks for every food you're going to reintroduce. And that can be kind of overwhelming to think it's going to take that long. The other is that there are very few foods that you really should eat every day. I mean, you can eat foods within a category. Like if you find that after reintroductions, you tolerate all types of nuts, say, for example, well, they're all fine. You pass the test on 5 or 6, 7, 8 different types of nuts. You can eat nuts every day, but I would prefer that you not eat the same nut every day, because you're going to maybe feel like that starts to get to be too much for your system. You get kind of, your body starts to react to it, doesn't tolerate it well. You're also going to be missing out on a chance to get other nutrients if you're eating one particular nut every single day. We always want variety. We want variety during the elimination phase, during the reintroduction phase, and for the rest of our lives. Variety, variety, variety. So that's the one point where if you get that resource and you see that in there, just, if anybody who's listening to this or watches the recording, file that away in your head and remember, I remember that one coach, Jamie Hartman, she said, maybe you don't need to eat this food every day for 7 days. It's kind of an optional thing. What usually happens with people is that over time, just living in the real world and living your life, you start to figure some of those things out. So I'll give you an example from my own personal journey. I found that initially when I did the reintroduction phase, that I didn't tolerate some of the nightshades very well, primarily tomatoes. I did fine with white potatoes, and I did okay with like peppers, actually, probably because you don't ever eat them in huge quantities. But if I had one of my favorite tomato dishes, I would sometimes have joint pain the next day, or have an upset, system, or even trigger a flare of Crohn's disease, which is my primary diagnosis. After much more time of avoiding that food and healing and really overall just improving my health and getting to a much healthier state, I thought, I wonder if I can try tomatoes again. And part of that was driven by the fact that I was getting ready to go to Italy, where I was going to be, cooking for a group of individuals. I was there as a visiting chef at a retreat, and none of them needed to avoid nightshades. So you can see where this is going. So we're in Italy, they're thinking we're going to have tomatoes. None of them have to avoid it. I want to use tomatoes. They're beautiful. They're fresh. They're delicious. And so I thought this is an opportunity for me to see how I do with them. And I found that I was eating them every day because they were just part of our menu, not in huge quantities, but they were coming in every day. And about the fifth day, I started getting joint pain I hadn't had in a long time. And so I just said, okay, I think I need to stop eating the tomatoes. So I just restricted myself from eating them for the rest of the week. By the time the week was over, that joint pain had gone away. So, if I hadn't done that kind of like real world experiment today, I wouldn't know for sure. But now I'm pretty confident that, I can have tomatoes once in a while, and I could probably even have the leftover of that tomato dish the next day. So I could probably have them 2 days in a row. But if I get beyond that, if I start to have them on the 3rd day, the 4th day, then I'm probably going to start to get some joint pain. And I don't know what would happen if I kept doing that. I might end up with a full-blown flare of my autoimmune disease. That's just me. And that is something that I took a long time to figure out. This isn't something that just occurs from one simple reintroduction test. But I wouldn't have probably figured that out even if I'd followed that procedure, where if I had tried back when I first reintroduced them. Actually, it wouldn't have happened anyway because I didn't even pass the 1st day. So that's another lesson here. I can tell you all these resources, they're great, but the ultimate resource, the number one resource that's really going to help you with the reintroduction phase is going to be your own body, and listening to your own body and keeping records of things that you do so that you can go back and look at that. Because honestly, I don't know if I would have caught on to that whole tomato thing had it not been for the fact that I was clearly out of my normal routine. I was in a place where my ingredients were different. I could have possibly attributed to that joint pain to a lot of different things. I was sleeping in a strange bed, I had jet lag, all those things. But the fact that it started and went away based on whether or not I was eating tomatoes gave me a pretty good indication. So resources, yes, they're out there. Hopefully those were useful ideas of where to look for them. Bottom line, though, you're going to have to trust your own instincts on that. And if you're having trouble, this is something an AIP certified coach like myself or my colleagues can be really helpful with. Helping people through reintroductions is something that I find really rewarding. Sometimes people just kind of need to talk about it with somebody, like talk it through and talk about what they felt when they ate it. And that helps them get a clearer sense of how it's really working for them. It's such an important part of this whole process, and one that I don't think we talk about enough in this whole AIP community. So that is the end of our questions, and it is practically the end of our time. So I will wrap up. I just want to thank the people who submitted these questions, and thank anybody who's watching this as a recording. I am not going to be able to have a session next Thursday. So there you will see, if you go and try to submit a question, that there's nothing available for June 11th. Looking at the calendar to make sure we're at the dates right. That's the next Thursday, but June 18th and June 25th. And then again in July, I expect to be able to do these most every Thursday. So if other questions come up as follow-up to these, please feel free to submit them. Or if you want to talk with me one-on-one, I do free 15-minute discovery consultations with anyone. There's no obligation, to purchase anything from me, although usually the focus of them is kind of to talk about whether you want to work with me or not. But I'm also happy to just give you 15 minutes of my time. I want to help people. So please take advantage of that. So thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your questions. And I'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye, everybody.